Wow, I did not expect to get this far. Act 4. Alm runs down to the forest village to send medicinal syrup over to Celica. I'm playing the American version of the game, so Celica insists on getting payment up front as this woman's health insurance doesn't cover the medicine. Reinforcements on Celica's side don't start until the first battle, so she heads back to the forest village to forge a silver lance. Then, going through the temple basement, I stop to give some attack water to the new silver lance wielding Paula. Oma's wandering around in the basement in a fugue state, so Celica agrees to help him get home. The first battle is in a swamp. Swamp maps are fun because you don't have to worry about moving, because you can't. Well, the White Wings are able to fly over the swamp, and the enemies teleport to our little island sometimes, and Jenny's illusions are good at drawing fire and tricking Arcanists into burning their own HP on spells. So we have a few things working to our advantage at least. Paula comes in handy as well, with her ability to burn through Revenant HP with ease. Eventually, we run into a bit of a roadblock in the swamp, with a Dread Fighter threatening multiple units. Luckily, Jenny can crank out lots of illusions, and the enemies heavily favor attacking them. Taking down the Dread Fighter is an incredible pain in the ass. Saber gets crit by him, and a turn wheel just results in Saber missing him. On the next turn, Bowie and Sonia crit him to death, and I can finally roll over the rest of the map. It's a slow crawl over to Ross's dad, but we eventually kill him, a little earlier than usual thanks to Garcia teleporting slightly to the left. Barely anyone else teleports though, and Kamui gets the last canter. Celica follows a strange voice to a strange man, and then we dive into a skirmish with Necrodragons. We've killed groups of these guys before with less power at our disposal, and despite having the teleportation skill, they don't use it at all. So I bag them as often as possible while they're still isolated, and even when they group up, we have 2 Seraphim casters and units that are generally either super powerful or strong enough to contribute a little bit. Moving on. Next up is Dolph Keep. The snipers in the keep threaten so much territory, so I try to advance slowly. Dolph summons Necrodragons, which are pretty annoying here, so I try to make my side of the map at least a little bit safer. Teleporting Necrodragons are a little too much for most of my units to handle, especially standing around in a swamp. Teleporting enemies seem to prefer moving normally if there's a unit in range, so Saber serves as bait for pulling at least one Necrodragon closer. The power of teamwork and friendship lets me take down another Necrodragon, but honestly, these guys are just going to come back soon. The real target is Dolph, and while I hesitate to call reaching him difficult, because of all the turn wheels I have, it's still pretty tedious trying to find the right crit at the right time, or trying to bank on dodging a shaky hit and failing, and it takes several turn wheels before my units are even close to getting inside. Once breaking in starts to go well, and the last enemies outside of the keep start to fall down hard, it actually looks like I might beat the chapter. Sadly, Dolph is starting to see the writing on the wall and he pulls back. I continue to play tug of war with teleporting Necrodragons down to my very last turn wheel use. I know what I need to do. Sonia burns a hole through a wall of Necrodragons, and Jenny, Thanks, Jenny, but I want to get more of my units close before I make my move. Jenny, Paula, and Sonia clear all of the tiles around Dolph, and then Saber goes in for a risky attack, and Leon whittles him down with Hunter's Volley. But since no one can finish him off, Dolph heals and Saber guts him on the next turn. Finally, that's over. Or is it? Saber apparently didn't kill Dolph hard enough, so Masked Man comes and finishes him off, and then finally takes off his mask. Welcome to the party, Conrad. After killing Dolph, Celica goes into his basement and breaks some of his crap. Then we find the Lost Treescape. I definitely do not pull up a map on Serenus Forest to get through this part. I used my incredible Fire Emblem expert brain to get through it instead. Definitely. The battles here are not difficult, and as usual with dungeon battles, I use them to give experience to those closest to leveling up so as to not waste bonus experience. I grab all of the treasure with the help of my incredible photographic memory. Then I easily locate Milla's shrine and promote Bowie to a sage and Kamui to a dread fighter. Finally, I feed Paula Defense Juice, which is this video's sponsor. Defense Juice, feel nothing. At the sage's hamlet, this man teaches us the multiplication table for 4, then disappears. Wow, I didn't know my dad was in this game. Then I go to the blacksmith and forge Saber's Brave Sword into a Brave Sword +2, which would come in handy for the rest of the game. At the merchant, I give a mage ring over to Alm, since Noma doesn't really need it right now. After securing Alm's promotion and pranking him by pretending to be a ghost, Celica decides to also send the killer bow off to Alm and hand the reins over to him. The first thing Alm does is upgrade the killer bow to give to Python. The second thing is to run back to the Deliverance hideout and give that juicy promotion to Alm. Faye is so inspired by Alm's greatness that she becomes a saint. Then Alm sets off to the strange lands of Act 4, Alm Edition. A cool anime battle breaks out, and then the battle actually starts. Everyone starts in separate groups, so naturally the first thing I do is bring everyone together. I decided the best place for that is in the middle. Units in this run tend to perform best when surrounded by literally all of their friends, so yeah, that's great. The teleporting started instantly, of course, and soon enough I found myself surrounded by enemies. My goal was to clear enemies out as they approached, and if any of my units happened to die on enemy phase, I'd simply turn wheel back and put my units in a slightly different position. Basically, I wanted a situation where Berkut and Fernand were nowhere near me, so I could deal with the generic goons first without having to worry about whittling tanky units down. I got my wish, more or less, and was able to clear out enemy units at a good pace. On turn 3, Fernand came to say hello to Cliff, and Berkut still stayed well away. So on turn 4, Cliff was able to return Fernand's hello and grab his Iron Lance, a very useful item for Act 4 of course. The mage ring that Celica gave to Alm comes in handy as Delphia and Luthier traded around to lend some long distance hits. On the next enemy phase, Berkut comes around but doesn't attack anyone, which is basically the best outcome. It takes a little bit of rescuing, but I'm able to take Berkut down with extreme ease. And the last 2 enemies on the map die quickly. Berkut breaks Chekhov's mirror, Alm saves everyone through the power of prayer, and Berkut teaches us a new word.
Prickly.
Next up is the Rigel Forest battle against Sizor? I don't know, names that start with X are hard to say. Anyway, he's accompanied by a ton of witches with a not yet seen teleportation skill. Luthier and Delphia get used as witch baits, but Silk gets obliterated by a teleporting dread fighter, which is just how the game goes sometimes. Turn-wheeling backward lets me try to be luckier. Destroying witches at this point is mind-numbingly easy, because magic ignores terrain avoid bonuses. Delphia, with her magic ring, is able to not only reliably hit witches in the woods, but deal a decent chunk of damage to them and outrange them at the same time. Scissor offers barely any challenge at all and gets taken down in 3 rounds, with Lucas, Python, and Luthier all pitching in to end the guy. The rest of the enemies are pushovers. Now, I could just murder Zeke and move on with the rest of the game, but that seems rude, so Fear Mountain it is. If you've watched up to this point, you already know the first move is to merge the units into a clump of doom, then wait to see which enemy teleports and which child they decide to attack, then destroy the enemy in the most efficient and fitting way possible. Next, heal the victim of the attack. Finally, reposition your units for the next enemy phase, cushioning weaker units by surrounding them with ones that are more able to take a hit. Do accidents happen sometimes? Absolutely. While clearing out the enemies on the right side of the map, someone decides to pay a visit to Silk, and Tobin gets beaten up by the enemies coming from the north. And sometimes you just miss a hit you need in order to kill a dangerous enemy, and just want to try again. Thanks, Miller's Turnwheel. Normally the witches are the most annoying part of this map, at least in my opinion, but in this run it's the knights that prove to be the most annoying. So when the last one is dead, I can actually focus on the witches. The generic ones get in the way, but of course they're not the real target since they just keep spawning, so I lure out Marla with a little Matilda gaming, warp Delphia northward, and clear our teams up with her to finish the boss off. With that out of the way, Alm dies into Fear Mountain Shrine real quick, and of course Nui Baba gets reinforcements. You know what, let's just reload and get her out of the way. Nui Baba has a spell called Medusa, which is basically like Eclipse in the Binding Blade, except it actually has a chance to hit. It normally has a range of 5 tiles, but Nui Baba's Mage Ring bumps it up to 7. Naturally, the first thing I do is warp Cliff northward. I also try to bring Python closer so he can help. Various units lurk by the base of the stairs in anticipation of enemies warping in on either side. My enemy phase plan goes pretty well until the Cantor comes by to set up shop on the right side of the map and Arcanists start to flank me. The nice thing about not having a bow knight yet is that our snipers can actually climb the mountain leading up to Nui Baba's shitty house and start picking off enemies. I start working on baiting the gargoyles and Arcanists, while Cliff, Python, and Grey are assigned to handle the abode. Grey's Apotrope ability really makes Medusa a lot less threatening. For better or for worse, most of the work for this chapter went into the initial setup. Whenever something bad happens, it's easy enough to turn back time, but when my units on the bottom of the map get too overwhelmed, I have to delay my plans and pull back the abode team. I cannot deal with gargoyles that double all of my units for very long, so Matilda shoves Grey closer to the Cantor in an effort to just get rid of him. With a few turn wheels left, I can afford to take a chance on Python critting Nui Baba, and he does, eventually. Fortunately, we don't have to climb all the way to the top, since the enemies insist on leaving the relative safety of Nui Baba's house to attack our weaker units, but only end up exposing themselves to death by Hunter's Volley. Matilda comes in handy for shoving people around when Silk needs some extra warp range. I guess this is what people mean when they say Matilda is better than Clive. And the battle is finally over. Tatiana is released from the Nui basement, and we all go into Fear Mountain Shrine. I make sure to take in the units I want to promote, and the units I want to level up towards promotion. After clearing out the initial groups of Arcanists, I take on the statue challenge right away. I'm not going to say it was easy, but it was definitely manageable. Tatiana and Delphia are particularly helpful, but Alm with Python's Killer Bow was the MVP. After getting Duma's Lance, the next stop is the Miller Shrine. Here, Luthier becomes a sage, Silk ascends into sainthood, and Cliff is glued to a horse. Then we take a water break and pump Tobin full of speed. Going further into the shrine, at the route split, I go left first. The first area doesn't prove much of a challenge, though accidents do occasionally happen. Going further in, I take the Shadow Sword and the Cog, and I don't need the Revival Shrine because I am good at video games. Except for the part where I realized I forgot to give Tatiana the mage ring that Nui Baba dropped. Whoops. I stealth back to the route split and then upgrade to Python 3. Time for the next half of the shrine. I get through it, up to a room that I know has 2 groups of enemies. I do not want to fight 2 groups worth of numbing claws and other crap at the same time, so I spend an absurd amount of time trying to bait them apart. Not only do the enemies refuse to separate, they eventually get stuck together and start shaking? I'm not sure if I need to censor this. I run out to almost the exit of the area and go back, and that seems to do the trick. What a weird game. With that experience collected, I can move on, make a very easy choice, get all the rest of the cool items, and then head back. On the way back, I grab a little bit of extra experience to promote Delphia into a priestess, and get out of here. Next, Alm goes on his way to Rigel Plains to fight this man with an elegant mustache. Since Alm freed Tatiana, Zeke decides he doesn't want to be a Camus archetype anymore, and betrays the enemy to join us. Kind of. I do the sensible thing and use Lucas to clog up the bridge because it's one of those maps, and although enemies could teleport across, not all of them will. The ones that do, well, we just kinda survive them through good luck. And I have 10 turn wheels, so I can afford to get unlucky a couple of times, or just play super aggressively. When Cliff double crits Jerome, I decide now's a good time to feed a kill to someone, and the lucky winner is Matilda, who uses the experience pretty well, I guess. More importantly, we get a gold mark before the green units do. Craig gets a last kill, and that's the end of what is probably the easiest battle we'll have for a while. We follow Zeke to the Regalian village nearby and talk to him. Zeke explains that Rudolph told him if Zeke were to ever meet someone with a birthmark on their left hand, he should join their army. With that, Alm heads out and goes back to Nui Baba's abode to return the mage ring he borrowed from Celica, and deliver a new speed ring as well. There's also the matter of the gossamer hair we got from the dragon guy in Fear Mountain. That needs to go to Celica so she can backtrack an absurd distance to the recently found treescape, Dolph's basement, a swamp full of zombies, the Temple of Milla to promote Katria, and presumably a bunch of other places to reach a skilled angler and give him his stupid hair. Celica walks for 2 days straight, comes back and collects her fish. She gives the fish to a chef, who gives her spice. This game makes sense, don't question it. Then Celica goes back to the mountain village to tell this woman that her son is dead, give this lumberjack an axe in exchange for a bear statue, and it's off to the smithy to sell spice, forge a new brave sword, a new killer bow, and get back on track. Now that we've done a bunch of smart preparation, it's time to blindly storm Duma Gate. First things first. There are enemies outside of the gate that need to be defeated. The more enemies we remove, the fewer we'll have to deal with when the guys inside start teleporting outside. Jenny deploys some illusions to help distract the enemies away from attacking our units, which usually works. And Sonya has a steel shield, so she can survive a round with a Dread Fighter if she needs to, which she does. Breaching the gate as quickly as possible is important too, so Saber dives right in. The worst enemies on this map for Celica's team to face are the Dread Fighters, by far. Only a few of our units can 1v1 them. The rest have to gang up on a single Dread Fighter to even come close to killing them. Saber is one of those few that can handle the job on enemy phase, which is why he's inside. In case you're not aware, Jamil, the boss of this map, has a cool ability called Upheaval. It has a range of yes, and can do up to 18 damage to everyone at once. It can't kill anyone outright, but it happens first thing on enemy phase, which means other enemies can swoop in and take advantage of the new injuries. There's no good way to account for this without killing Jamil, but it's gonna be a while before that happens, so it's up to using Milla's turn wheel and hoping for the better luck next time. It takes a few turns, but I eventually position my units in a way where I can maybe deal with the upheaval bullshit soon. But first, the Cantor has got to go before he teleports outside, so Leon assassinates him. On the next turn, Bowie starts to chip away at the boss, and Atlas has the honor of finishing him off. Est bonks a random straggler, and that battle is finally over. Next up is Jedha. I wish I could say that I found an epic and amazing way to defeat Jedha and take his Draco shield, but I don't really want it. So I don't spend my valuable time rigging a crit on him on the 4th attack or whatever. I just use some turns to kill monsters and get experience. See ya later, Jedha. The next stop is technically Duma Tower, and while it's tempting to just dive right in, Leon's ready to promote, so I do a little backtracking to handle that. Now Leon's even more deadly than before. Amazing. And while we're here, I may as well force feed Atlas and Sonya some golden apples so they can promote too. That'll make them more useful. Definitely. Okay, now it's time to tackle a tower for real. I can only afford to bring my best units here because I don't really want to have to do stuff over again. The random battles on the first floor are really not that hard, but the small maps combined with our long-distance combat abilities tend to mean a lack of enemies that actually teleport. It's the perfect opportunity to feed Celica some kills and give experience to those closest to leveling up. I'm not convinced that it will help his speed issues, but I feed Leon more speed anyway. He has Hunter's Volley, so doubling isn't a problem, but he still gets doubled by literally everything. And Male Corn gets some extra luck. Although the first floor boss battle is relatively easy thanks to the alluring power of illusions, Katria still gets Dread Fightered, as pretty much any unit would. I have to get lucky hitting enemies on tile, and fortunately, I do, with just one rewind required. Now for the second floor. After collecting a cog and giving some extra skill to May, we find that the second floor boss is Necro Dragons. No problem. And gargoyles, okay, those might be a problem. I want to get rid of those as soon as possible because they're too fast to comfortably deal with. And then there's Bow Knights. Well, they'll shoot at illusions and miss. That's fine. At turn 2, I'm actually able to kill every enemy except the boss dragon, with 62 HP and 11 speed. Just can't one-round him with anyone, really. After some painful trial and error, I decided to just start the whole battle over and use the stairs as a defensive line, since the tile will provide an avoid bonus to my units, but the stairs won't give any bonus to the enemy Bow Knights. With this setup, we'll clear the battle a bit more slowly, but at least Conrad is able to land some chipping blows. On this turn 2, Conrad can kill the boss dragon as long as Sonya lands one Excalibur crit. Cleaning up the rest of the map is trivial with Leon and Saber's coin flip crit rates. Onto the third floor, I take my time sneaking around, trying to lure apart the encounters since I don't want to have to deal with more than one at a time. I screw it up anyway because of an encounter I just didn't see. At least I got some footage to show why I wanted to avoid the situation in the first place. Turn wheel uses are precious, you know. Anyway, at the HP fountain I give Sonya 2 more hit points, and then I'm off to confront the boss, who is a Bow Knight. Even the game developers knew Bow Knights are scarier than Necro Dragons. However, I'm able to fight this battle without a single hitch, so who knows. Hunter's Volley Leon is just too good, and the AI is still convinced it's easier to kill an illusion with a bow than it would be to kill a Falcon Knight. On the fourth floor, Katria gets 2 more points of attack, and I give Celica 2 points of defense. After the easy random battles, it's time to fight the Mogul boss. The only time I have to use a turn wheel in this battle is due to a mishap with Jenny's Expel spell. I always forget it has no effect on monsters with the Great Terror skill. Oh well. Moguls aren't particularly strong or scary, but they are pretty fast, and of course they multiply. It's a good thing this isn't an all multiplying enemies challenge. But it's still a good idea to get rid of the Moguls as quickly as possible. When Moguls teleport, it's either to go after carefully placed illusion bait, or to die to a Saber crit, no in-betweens. Celica goes upstairs to talk to Jedha, and he explains that a sword-shaped eyelash got in Milla's eye, and she can't blink it out. I hate when that happens. Anyway, Alm can now proceed without triggering the annoying Dragon Earthquake encounter, and he charges right into Rigel Falls. If you've been paying attention to the series, you know my one weird trick for dealing with a split party deployment is to combine everyone by, turn 2 or 3, but that isn't really possible on this map, where 10 units start on the top of the map and the other 6 start on the bottom, with a broken bridge separating them. So I just make sure that both parties have units that are at least somewhat capable of fighting. My opening move is to make sure that Zeke carries Lucas's Rider's Bane over to the 5 guys on horses off to the right. Meanwhile, Python heads up to give a Duma Arcanist the only greeting such a person deserves. But the ultimate goal is to get the bottom team up to the top of the map as soon as possible. And that involves the Silk Warp and positioning our units to cross the river. The top team surrounds Delphia, so she doesn't get targeted by teleporters, while Claire's Pegasus heads south for the winter, into an empty area. Cancers love to teleport into empty areas, so I'm just filling space up, basically. Zeke's positioning causes the Bow Knights to take pot shots at him while clogging up the bridge to prevent the Arcanist from attacking him, while Python takes out a Bow Knight on enemy phase. The only enemy that teleports on turn 1 is this loser, who can't even one-shot Silk. After Zeke takes care of the enemy Gold Knights, we're faced with turn 2. Turn 2 is all about clearing out enemies that are too close for comfort and luring the Arcanist to his doom on enemy phase. Magnus, the boss of this chapter, gets a little too close to killing Forsyth while he protects Delphia from an unwanted attack. Then the Cancer fills that spot Claire was kinda guarding. On turn 3, Delphia punishes Magnus for his assault on Forsyth, but she needs a little help from the community surrounding her to finally be done with his awful behavior. While Zeke eats Bow Knights for breakfast, Cliff and Python work on making the bridge area Duma-free, and Python uses telekinesis to pick up mana herbs. Gray starts to cross the bridge, and Silk embraces her life as a living stairlift. On enemy phase, a Witch and an Arcanist trap Zeke on a bridge, but really they're trapped with him. Also, the Cancer decides against being attacked next turn. It's time to pull Claire back and form a defensive line. I start to position my Bow Knights towards the right side of the bridge area because of a gambit I want to pull in the next turn or 2. On enemy phase, Gray's healed up enough to survive multiple hits as long as he dodges one of 2 big attacks, and luckily he dodges both of them. Then the witches and gargoyles start to swarm. When turn 5 comes around, Faye rescues Silk up the stairs, Silk warps Python across the bridge, and Cliff moves to this random spot for some reason. Gray deletes Hestia, which also takes care of her summoned witches, Python starts working on cleanup, and the gargoyle crew moves to defend Delphia once again. On enemy phase, the gargoyles get everywhere, and the cantor teleports a little closer to me for some reason. Well, I'm not going to think about it too hard. Go Cliff! Before I wrap things up, Gray needs to roundhouse crit the Baron, and Delphia needs to weigh in on the Clive versus Matilda debate.
Ooh, Matilda!
Now I just need Cliff to crit, and all the gargoyles disappear in shame. Battle complete, and not even a single turn wheel use. Okay, now Alm has to go to the last Bastion. Here we meet this guy. I'm sorry, do I know you? Because you're acting like you know me, and it's kinda confusing. Well, this battle looks like it's gonna be a bit tedious. I try to move up a combination of units that can take the most hits and units that can pick off the guys in the little hallways. The enemy phase seems like it would be trivial, just watching enemies attack our units and promptly die. But the thing is, the Arcanists hit really hard and Python's bones are made of glass, so I use the turn wheel to start the battle over because I'm too lazy to reset and take a different tack instead. Silk warps Gray into hallway 1, preventing enemies from moving further south in that direction, and the plan is pretty much the same otherwise. A Bow Knight gives up his floor dodge bonus to attack Cliff from outside, and sheer luck prevents him from dying to what's-his-name. The plan is otherwise pretty much the same, with the Bow Knights picking people off from outside and Silk warping in the best combat units that... God damn it, Zeke. A little turn wheeling and doing things in a different order, and suddenly Zeke survives, go figure. The plan pretty much continues unabated, with a mean teleporting Baron being the only real hitch in the plan. Eventually the Baron attacks the right guy, and the enemies start to pull away to try and heal. The next victim of warp is Cliff, who goes off to shoot the guy. That's pretty much how the rest of the battle goes. With the enemies on the run, it's up to the best, highest movement units to hunt them down. With that done, Alm goes back to the Rigelian village to make a killer bow for himself, silver lances for our less well-trained lance users, and a brave sword out of the shadow sword for Gray. After selling some trash, I make Alm's killer bow +2. Finally, Alm has arrived at the North Pole and it's time to defeat Rudolph. The gimmick to this battle, such as it is that Rudolph will refuse to attack Alm. With this in mind, it's important to position my units in a way that Rudolph is baited toward Alm and clogs up the enemy charge, so that we can deal with teleporting enemies without having to worry about the ones that decide to move normally. If that doesn't make sense, don't worry, it will later. Probably. Anyway, time to send Rider's Bane Zeke up to the wall to play with Bow Knights. Then I send my other units up, and bungle a Silk Rescue to set up a warp for turn 2. So that's a turn wheel. On enemy phase, Barons close in from either side of the back line and a Bow Knight teleports to take a pot shot at Gray. On turn 2, I use a trade chain to pass the majoring around so that Delphia and Tobin can take care of those Barons. After Tatiana fortifies, Silk sends Cliff onto the walls next so that he can do his thing. I'd go over every single thing that happens on enemy phase, but the only important thing is the fact that Rudolph teleports behind Clive and completely ruins him. There's no way to really prevent Rudolph from teleporting, so I just have to turn wheel and get luckier. It takes a few rollbacks, but eventually Rudolph doesn't teleport and nobody else dies. With Rudolph closing in, I let Tobin and Luthier share a mage ring to chip down some gold knights. Alm gets a kill with his bow, and Lucas backs off to put Alm in between him and Rudolph. This is the setup I was going for. Now I just have to clear some stragglers off to the sides, and on the next enemy phase, Rudolph decides to stare at Alm. Perfection. Now this battle ends when Rudolph is defeated, so the mage trio passes around a ring to help chip him down to about half health. Faye rescues Zeke down from the wall, Alm moves aside to take a pot shot, and Zeke closes in with a measured response to Rudolph's fellow people with birthmarks discourse.
This is as it should be.
Rudolph then calls Alm Albine, a portmanteau of Albert Einstein, who you'd have to be in order to understand this game's writing. Next we meet Messena, who looks like the game's final recruitable character, right? Right? Oh, okay then. We could give in to despair at the bald guy not joining us.
But destiny would not permit this son of the brand to simply walk away.